You ever notice how the moment you stop giving, the same face that ignored you starts to miss you like you're a ghost haunting their memory? 1 second, you're the bedrock, steady, unshakable, the silent force holding ground. And the next, you're nothing but a shadow slipping past their vision. You told yourself loyalty was the armor, the key that would unlock their respect, their choice to keep you close. But maybe loyalty is the roar no one hears in the deafening silence they choose to drown you out with. You poured yourself in, every ounce of grit and patience, believing that showing up when others walked away was proof enough, to them, to yourself, that you mattered. Only to find loyalty was just a low hum, background noise to their priorities, something to be tuned out when convenience called louder. Why do we set our hearts on the line, expecting hands to catch us, and instead find the empty air underneath? You gave all you had, and still she was waiting for something else, something that loyalty can't buy. You weren't a choice. You were an option. That's the hard cut that no one warns you about. In the wasteland left behind by shifting shadows and cold silences, this isn't weakness. It's a reckoning. Loyalty doesn't bind others to you. It reveals what they were never willing to hold. You wanted to stand as the wolf guarding the pack, but you were left guarding a phantom instead. And in that distance, in the quiet pulling away, the real truth speaks louder than any promise ever could. You were told to open your heart, to lay down the bars and let someone in, to be the pillar they could lean on, steady, unshakable, available. But here's the truth nobody handed you on a silver platter. The more you show up emotionally, the more you disappear. Why does loyalty make us invisible? Why does sticking around, being there, make us feel like the furniture in a room, necessary to fill space but never noticed? You stand wide open, raw as steel, hammered in the forge, and what comes back? Silence. Neglect. A cold shrug of disinterest that cuts deeper than any wound earned on a battlefield. You ever ask yourself why this happens? How the damn world can tell you to be vulnerable? No, demand it, with the promise of connection and strength, then treat your willingness as a weakness, a liability. You're out here on the front lines of your relationships and your own identity torn between what your father's generation showed you. Hold quiet, hold steady, and this new parade demanding tears like a badge you can't take off. So who wins? Who gets to keep standing when your openness is met with indifference? Being loyal doesn't earn you respect in this world. It buries you. Your devotion is mistaken for desperation. You become the ghost lurking in a home where no one calls your name. Did your silence teach you strength, or was it the shield you needed against the deafening loneliness? Is your rawness a kind of surrender, or the last pure thing you own? How many times have you built bridges to people who never cared if they burned? How many times have you laid your soul on the line only to find it treated like wallpaper? Pretty, static, but utterly replaceable. You wonder if devotion suffocates your identity, or if it's the hollow space left behind when that loyalty is swallowed by nothing but return air. What's left when the echo of your presence fades into a whisper no one hears? That's the paradox you live in. A man taught to open himself up and yet punished for doing just that. It's like donning armor, only to feel the blade slice you from the blind side, again and again. But here's what won't change. In that silence, in that invisible space, you're still standing. You walked through hell and never raised your voice. You showed up, even when the game's rules made sure you'd lose. That kind of pain carves something fierce and cold inside, a steel you can't buy or sell. The world may not see you, but you know your worth. You are not the furniture. You are the storm no one prepared for. You've felt the weight of storms, not the kind you can see, but the ones roaring inside where silence feels impossible. There's a brutal truth most men never say aloud. The chaos outside doesn't own you, but every second spent wrestling with it chips away at the steel within. Imagine a storm-tested oak, battered by unrelenting winds yet never uprooted. That's the heart of Stoicism. Less about control over the world, more about control over yourself. Epictetus said you can't command what others do to you, only how you respond. This isn't easy. It's the grind of a long winter without promises of spring. I remember my friend Adam. He used to run himself ragged chasing approval, hustling for scraps of respect from people who didn't see him. Every nod, every smile was a fuel pump to his self-worth. But the tank kept draining, faster than he realized. One day, he stepped back, stopped chasing the mirage. What he found wasn't emptiness, but a solid core. Himself. Not needing to be chosen. Not hungry for validation. Just enough as he was, standing rooted like that old oak, surviving every brutal winter by holding fast, not reaching blindly for light. Stoicism doesn't ask you to shut down your feelings or become cold. It teaches you to regulate the flow of energy you give away, to guard your flame, not waste it on the chaos that doesn't belong to you. The pain you carry is not a weakness. It's the crucible that forges you into something unshakable, a man who moves through storms with quiet resolve. This isn't surrender. It's the reclamation of your spirit. A silent command that the tides of others' opinions will not erode the foundation you've built in the depths of your own mind. You've walked through hell and never raised your voice. You find strength not by bending to the wind, but by standing still and letting the storm break itself against your roots. This is where clarity lives, where the noise ends, and a man becomes unbreakable. Detachment isn't cutting the rope. It's tightening the knot around your own spine. You understand that your worth isn't a reflection in someone else's shattered mirror. It's grounded deep under your skin, like steel forged at the heart of a mountain. When the world throws its judgments, its slights, its noise, you don't flinch. You stand unmoved because you've traveled far enough to see your own ground, your own horizon. The traveler doesn't chase approval. He steers his ship through fog and storm without asking who's watching. You don't tether your soul to the whims of others, because you know what it means to be anchored by your truth. Emotional control doesn't mean burying the wildfire inside. It's recognizing the flames for what they are: heat and light, force and shadow, but never letting them burn the tent you stand beneath. Feel the surge. Acknowledge the ache, the rage, the grief, but you do not let those currents drag you off your course. The calm in the storm isn't weakness, it's mastery. You are the helmsman who guides the sails, pulling tight the ropes when the wind bites. You restrain because you're aware every outburst is a crack in your armor, every reckless word a breach in your fortress. You wear your control like a wolf's black fur in winter, quiet, unyielding, unseen until the moment comes to strike. Mission, first, is the code that carves out your path through the wilderness. Your purpose demands vigilance, relentless and sharp. No distraction, no distraction. Those who walk beside you either match your pace or fall silent behind. If your mission is the hunt, then the pack must align, not divert. A man who puts his calling before his comfort builds a legacy in stone, not in sand. Others will test that line, some out of fear, others from weakness, yet you hold firm. You don't look back for their permission or their applause. Your eyes stay fixed ahead on the quarry only you can see. Self-mastery is the forge where you temper your blade every day. It's not just perfecting strength, but embracing the scars that shard your reflection into something formidable. You face your edges, your flaws, the parts that bleed and ache, because resistance reminds you who you are. You walk through hell and never raise your voice. That is the quiet roar of a man refining himself with relentless discipline. This is no fleeting motivation. This is iron and blood and sweat, the slow carving of a warrior's spirit. You are both the hammer and the anvil, the question and the answer. Silence is not a surrender. It is your greatest weapon, a place where the world's noise falls away like dead leaves in the fall. In that stillness, you gather strength sharper than any shout. You cultivate wisdom in the gaps between words, in the breaths you don't waste. You don't scream to be heard. Instead, you move with the weight of storms contained, shifting the world quietly but inevitably. Your actions speak in volumes others can't understand. You don't explain. You elevate. You carried wounds no one asked to see, scars whispered by silence until they became your armor. The fire of rejection didn't burn you down. It melted away the things that never belonged, leaving behind steel forged in solitude. You learned, through cold nights and empty rooms, that the weight of loss could either break you or reshape you. You chose to stand. Now you are the storm-tested oak, roots spread wide beneath barren ground, unshaken by the winds that once threatened to uproot you. No longer do you reach for echoes outside yourself or wait on mirrors to tell you who you are. Your identity is not a reflection. It is the shadow you cast in quiet moments, the unyielding shape you carve out with deliberate hands. Every step you take, unannounced and unmoved by applause, is proof that the man you were is nothing like the man you've become. Resilience is not a roar. It's the stillness after the storm, when the world thinks the fight is over, but you know it's just beginning. You walked through hell and never raised your voice, because strength isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. The distance you carved wasn't a retreat. It was an advance line drawn between who you were and who you're meant to be. This gulf forced you to look inward and accept that you are enough, without condition, without compromise. So walk forward knowing this. Your worth was never in their hands to give or take. It's rooted deep, silent, but steady. A weight that cannot be lifted or lost. Your identity isn't up for negotiation or explanation. It is a fortress built on the foundation of your own quiet rebellion against all that tried to diminish you. You don't explain. You elevate. I lead in silence.